This is DC, powered by people and ideas, where the community comes together, voices are heard, and decisions are shaped.
So I want to start by saying, welcome home.
Connecting you to what matters and to each other.
How you doing? What's the tea?
I'm Lorenzo Hall, and this is the DC Beat.
It is good to see you. Welcome to the DC Beat. I'm Lorenzo Hall. So it has already been a busy week in the city, so let's get right to the beat check. I want to talk about this so-called enhanced cooperation between DC police and federal agents. It is back in the spotlight after U.S. Marshals shot and killed a DC man a week ago in Northeast. 43-year-old Julian Bailey. His family held a vigil demanding answers. DC police say they got a call about someone making threats with a gun near Kenilworth Avenue and Hayes Street. Members of the U.S. Marshal Service and Park Police, they responded, and now they are part of President Trump's law enforcement surge here in the district. They spotted Bailey in his car. Eventually, U.S. Marshals shot Bailey, killing him. Why? Well, that is still not clear. The U.S. Marshals told us they don't comment on ongoing investigations. The D.C. Police Department wasn't even on scene when Bailey was shot, but they are investigating. Bailey's attorney, Andrew Clark, and community leaders, they want answers tonight.
Here we have changing stories, missing information. This is not what we are expecting from policing in our community. If there's nothing to show, why have we not seen the body-worn camera? If you have nothing to hide, why have we not heard any statements from the officers?
All those federal agents, none of them keep Jillian safe. It was like 20, 30 of them out there. Not one of them kept him safe from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bullets. None of them. And not even MPD, because they was nowhere to be found. When they showed up, his body was lifeless.
All right, so here's the deeper issue. I've heard from some of you and my DC police sources. There's concern these federal agents show up in neighborhoods, not understanding the city, its residents, with heavy-handed tactics and no accountability. So let's dig deeper. All right, Alex Dodds, one of the founders of Free DC, is here with us. Thank you for being here at the table. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you know about this case with Julian Bailey. We know what happened a week ago there in Northeast DC. First of all, based on what you've heard, we know that Free DC had a presence there. We saw Nene Taylor taking the mic just a minute ago. What do you make of what you've heard so far and what happened?
Yeah, the Julian Bailey situation is just so heartbreaking. We were at the vigil last week on Monday with his family, and hearing his family talk about what happened is just devastating. They are clearly mourning the loss of a father and their son and husband. The details of that situation are still being discovered. The official description of it has been very difficult to understand so far about exactly what transpired. What we do know is that a community member called 911, and typically in that situation you would expect MPD to respond, but MPD did not respond. U.S. Marshals arrived instead. It is unclear to everybody why that happened, why U.S. Marshals arrived instead of what we would typically expect of MPD showing up. Something transpired, we do not know what right now, and they shot and killed him. No matter what happened that day, there's almost no reason why having federal agents respond in place of local police is something that would be appropriate. So we're really worried about that.
And I think that's an interesting aspect of all of this, which I don't know if people who are watching might not realize. During the federal surge initially, you saw DC police officers with some of those federal agents. They were working hand in hand. This is the first time I've actually seen federal agents solely responding to a crime.
Right, and we've seen that over the last several months of federal agents and federal officers responding alongside MPD more and more. I've certainly seen that. Many of our community members have seen that. When MPD is called, it's not only MPD who respond, they're often flanked or sometimes even outnumbered by federal agents. That is not a dynamic that people have control over about what federal agencies respond. It's part of why Free DC and many of our community partners are so worried about about MPD's ongoing cooperation with federal agencies, just because we are seeing their behavior across the country, and it's very concerning. I'll also just add that this has been an issue, a problem in DC's underserved, marginalized, and over-policed communities for a really long time. The surge that has happened since August has been a very intense period of over-policing in DC, but it's something that's been a chronic problem, and DC residents have no ability to hold those agencies or those officers accountable for their actions in DC.
What do you say to people, you know, they're not plugged into the news, they're not plugged into what's happening, but they'll say, you know what, I feel safer, and I don't know why. Looking at the crime numbers, just pulled them. Take homicides, for instance. There have been 7. 1 is always too many. 7 this year, though, compared to 24 this time last year, so a 71% drop. The mayor says it's working. There's this need for federal agents. The interim police chief says it's working. We need these additional officers because the DC Police Department is short-staffed. So what do you say? What do you say to that and this difference?
I totally agree that 1 homicide is too many, and we should be doing everything that we can to get those numbers down. We should be doing that through the evidence-based best practices that have been proven to work. There are so much research and analysis about what works to reduce violence, particularly gun violence. Police surges like this one have been studied in other places. They might work for the short period of time while they're in place, but they are not a long-term solution. That is very clear. That DC has been trending down on violent crime for several years now, thanks in part to the investments that the district has made in wraparound services, intensive support for the people who are most directly impacted by violence. Those are the types of strategies that actually make communities safer for the long term. I think that the mayor and the police chief are under a lot of political pressure to go along with this surge under this administration and this president. DC has had gun violence prevention plans in place for a long time that we are supposed to be following. Massive surges of federal officers are not in those plans. That is not part of what the district has identified we need to be doing in order to reduce violence.
Tell us a bit about Free DC, if you will. You know, we've seen the signs all over the district now. We see the merch, people have the sweatshirts, the bags, the yard signs, everything. This organization began well before President Trump took office, yes, or the idea of it?
The movement for a free DC has been going on for generations, yes, and it really started with Marion Barry and the fight for DC home rule in the 1960s and early 1970s. Home rule is only 50 years old, right? DC's ability to have a mayor and a council has been around for less than one person's lifetime. Before that, DC was run by the federal government through a federal board of governors, and the Free DC movement has always been very closely tied to the need for DC home rule, expanded home rule, and eventual statehood. We refer to ourselves as the renewed movement to protect DC home rule and win dignity for the people of the District of Columbia, because we recognize that DC right now does not have the full rights and dignity that our communities deserve and that we need. We were founded, this new chapter of the organizing was founded in January of 2025. So right before this president took office, in part because we had heard him say on the campaign trail over and over again that he wanted to take over DC, he wanted to make the city beautiful, I could run that city so well, and we took that seriously. It has been several organizers from multiple movements, because every issue that the district faces is affected by our ability to set our own priorities, which is what home rule makes possible. If we don't have full home rule or full power over what happens here, we can't meet the needs for our communities for housing, for education, for food, our seniors. All of that is only made possible by home rule, and if we do not fight in this moment to protect, expand, and ultimately win statehood, every part of life in the district will be affected.
Why is this personal for you? Why do you feel like you need to be involved in this fight?
I think every person who lives and makes a home in the District of Columbia has a stake in this. My aging parents live here. I have, I'm raising children here, and I am a member of the community here, and I see that this is something that our communities very clearly need. I think, it really started in 2 years ago or 3 years ago now for me, when Congress disapproved the revised criminal code that DC had passed back in 2023. that was, a real emblematic moment of something that the district leaders and community members and experts had said, this is something that we need to do. DC, we need to update our criminal code. We need to prosecute people fairly and efficiently. We went through a very long democratic process to write that code update, review it, have public input, and eventually pass it into law. Congress overturned it, and they overturned it for reasons that we're seeing now, which is that they wanted to weaponize it for political reasons. And that was really what started my organizing on this issue. And and a lot of the other people who are now involved understood that moment 3 years ago, even before this administration, as a real vulnerability that if we don't proactively address this DC's lack of power, it's going to be a real problem.
All right, Alex Dodds, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Lorenzo.
All right, when we come back, sound off. We're going to check in on that big wastewater spill in the Potomac. Is our drinking water really safe? Plus, candidate for mayor, DC Mayor Janeese Lewis George is at the table. What she's saying about her plans for the DC Police Department and housing if elected. But first, we remember civil rights icon, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who died at 84 this week. His roots, we know, run deep here in the district. He lived and worked in our area for years and was one of DC's first shadow senators. We are less than 4 months away from the primary election in D.C. We'll be talking with the candidates, of course. So last week, we heard from Kenya McDuffie, candidate for mayor, and now we are hearing from one of his chief rivals. Janeese Lewis George, thank you for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Or JLG, as your supporters call you, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, first up, I want to get your take on some of the big issues that are impacting the city right now. We know that 43-year-old Julian Bailey was shot and killed by U.S. Marshals last week in Northeast D.C. What have you heard as a council member, first of all, regarding that situation? Any updates you can share with us?
Yeah, I actually was having a conversation last night I wasn't able to attend the vigil, but from people who attended the vigil. What we've heard is Julian was an amazing husband, an amazing father to his children, to various family members, and many of his family members indicated that they felt that this is a situation that could have been de-escalated and did not have to end in violence in this way. And, here in the district, we train our officers to de-escalate. We train our officers to use lethal force only when necessary. And this is a federal entity. And so the expectation in the District of Columbia is they should follow those same steps. Try to de-escalate a situation. Don't use lethal force until absolutely necessary. And so right now we are gathering the facts. What we've heard is people want us to inquire into the facts, to get body-worn camera footage and figure out what happened here so that ultimately the end is justice for the family. So right now, the biggest issue is getting the answers, getting the body-worn camera footage, and assessing the situation for how we should move forward in justice for Julian and his family.
Yeah, so we know the U.S. Marshals and Park Police, they were patrolling that area as part of President Trump's federal surge.
Correct.
And you've said before that you would end that collaboration between D.C. Police and these federal agencies. What does that look like exactly?
Yeah, I think it's important to know, we have to end the collaboration with federal agencies as it relates to federal immigration enforcement. I think that's the key, right? The District of Columbia, I know as a former prosecutor who worked here, is a system that relies on both federal and local entities. As you know, we don't prosecute our own crimes. We rely on federal appointed judges. And so it's important to recognize that we will have to coordinate with federal entities like I've done on Kennedy Street around, getting guns off our street. And so that work will happen. What we're talking about here is ending the cooperation that is leading to federal law enforcement, immigration enforcement, which I have seen as the Ward 4 council member. Our families have been deeply broken apart. I have seen individuals taken off our streets in front of their children, in front of their wives, and who have been detained in ICE detention centers across the country, many who have been deported, who have not gotten due process. And so I think it's important as the mayor on day one to end the MPD's chief's order as it relates to cooperation with federal law enforcement as it relates to immigration enforcement. And that's something I believe needs to happen on day one. And I've been very clear about that's how we have to and need to move forward. And we see other entities doing that. Abigail Spanberger just did it on day one in Virginia. Westmore has been very outspoken about that. And so it's our duty to defend all of DC residents, and that's why I'm running for mayor, to protect all of DC residents.
Well, we know the makeup between DC, Virginia, and Maryland is different in terms of the powers that a governor has versus DC's mayor. So what do you tell President Trump in a situation like that? Because he could still leave ICE officers on our streets. He could still try other moves when it comes to overtaking the DC Police Department or some of our other law enforcement agencies.
Absolutely. I think that's right. We have to realize where we are with lacking DC autonomy, and we'll have to deal with that. But the important part for us is that MPD officers are paid for by DC taxpayer dollars, and our resources, like our vehicles and other entities, is why I've said we have to end that cooperation. They are also having access to our radio waves and are inside of our stations, our district stations and roll calls. It's really impeding our officers' ability to do their job that they want to do, that they serve bravely to do, which is protect DC residents. And so what I say to Trump is that in this moment, our DC residents deserve safety and protection, and our officers need to do the job that they are charged to do and serve DC residents to do, and that's not being used right now as a weapon for your federal law enforcement mission that is happening not only in DC but across our country.
Jeffrey Carroll, we know he's the interim DC police chief. He has not been put before the council for confirmation. If you are mayor, do you want your own police chief? Do you put Jeffrey up for confirmation? What do you do?
I think we have to take an honest assessment of the entire administration. As you know, there will be a time for transition where we will have to evaluate, how we move forward. And so I think in doing our due diligence, we should do a national search. And we also should look internally to see officers who are doing the work now and pick someone who is going to prioritize rebuilding trust for DC residents, which we have to admit is broken because of that federal immigration enforcement collaboration, which has hurt our MPD's trust, which is why ending it on day one is important. But we have to have someone who's going to do the deep work of building relationships in our community, which many people feel have been broken. Officers actually being in the community and interacting with community and hearing from community and shifting to a service leadership type of model. All of our jobs is to serve our DC residents. And so I have a meeting set up to meet with Jeffrey Carroll, but as mayor, obviously I'm going to be evaluating all of our positions and seeing how we're going to move forward to make our city safer, which has to be a priority moving forward. We've made great strides in reducing crime, but we can do a lot more. I got to admit, I'm a little jealous of Baltimore. I do, and Brandon's doing a great job, and kudos to him. I'm jealous that Baltimore is succeeding ahead of DC when a lot of the ideas that they have implemented as far as intervention and prevention are things we could have done and should have been doing better as a district, and we could have gotten to those numbers earlier. So it's our time to step up and look at intervention, prevention, and enforcement, and do all three of those things. My grandma would say you can walk and chew at the same time, and that's what we got to do to create real public safety here in DC.
Now, on that note, this meeting with Jeffrey Carroll, is this part of your council duties, or
is
this just something that,
it's a part of my council duties.
Hearing
that's right.
Week? Okay.
That's right.
Let's talk about housing, because we know a lot of folks watching right now, whether you rent, whether you buy, the cost of living is increasing.
It is.
A lot of folks are trying to pay their bills. We've heard about affordability and producing more apartment units or housing that's affordable for people. The term affordability is still a bit ambiguous. So what's your solution there? We know you talked about social housing before. That was a big part of your platform in the council. That didn't go very far. So as mayor, do you bring it up again? Do you try and get it through? And what changes compared to what you did the first time?
Absolutely. We have a real affordability crisis here in DC. It's one of the reasons I'm running to address this affordability crisis with the attention and energy that it deserves. And as someone who family was displaced from my family DC home, I understand how important it is for us. And so for me, when I look at addressing the affordability crisis, it means that we have to build more housing and we have to build better housing. And in building more housing, that means taking advantage of building more housing, especially around our transit corridors. It also means using new tools like affordable housing, because the reality is we've spent about $1.4 billion as a city in creating affordable housing, and yet we are 10 years later deeper in the hole on creating affordable housing, and that's that deeply 30% AMI. Why? It's because that model does not work if we just rely on the market, because if you rely just on the market, their center is going to be profit. If you're investing, you want a profit, right? But in order to create deeply affordable housing, profit can't be the center point. And that's why district government has to step up in creating more deeply affordable housing.
Is this like public housing? Is this what we're talking about?
No, we're not talking about public housing. We're talking about government-owned, publicly owned, mixed income housing, where you have mixed income, you have deeply affordable, you have market rate housing, you have incomes for those who are between that 30% and 80% income level, and we are able to use those funds to create more affordable housing that we need. And we do it already in DC. We already have examples, like Allen Liu in Ward 6 is an example of a mixed housing where you have deeply affordable, mixed market rate, and it works. Now, this isn't the only tool, but it's about adding new tools to try to address the problem, but also fixing some of the other tools, right? Our IZ system is broken because we have some administrative issues that we're not addressing there, and accountability is not there. Our Housing Production Trust Fund, it is a source that we use, but we don't have real deep consistency on enforcing what is actually needs to be produced. And so I'm talking about adding new tools and also making the tools we have better to produce deeply affordable housing. And affordable, when I say affordable housing, I mean my generation of Washingtonians who grew up here. And listen, Lorenzo, we were told, go get an education and then use that education to get a good job. And once you get that good job, you'll be able to afford to raise your family and build the lives. And our generation is like, yeah, we did it. And we're struggling. We're feeling the crunch. We're not able to afford to buy homes, which is why, as mayor, I'm going to focus on reducing interest rate for first-time home buyers. Not only are we not able to buy homes, we also have to contend with the fact that the rent is too high, and we're not actively doing enough to produce the housing we need to lower those rents, which is why we got to add new tools to do that. The other thing is we're feeling the crunch around childcare. We have the most expensive childcare in the country in DC. So what do you have? Our generation who went and got JDs and MBAs and every degree you can name, we're also two income households where people are even making good money are still struggling. I want to be clear, when I talk about the affordability crisis, I want to be clear, everyone is feeling the crunch in this city, and we have a duty to do something.
How do you pay for all of this, though? Because we know right now the district has been sitting pretty in terms of its finances for the last couple of years. But as of late, we know Congress has been meddling. We know that recently they tried to say, or they are saying, that DC cannot opt out of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And that's going to create another big hole. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's unpredictable at this point. If you're mayor, how do you counter that? How do you balance? What do you cut if there is anything to cut?
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you asked me this question. I want to say budgets are moral documents, right? And we have to prioritize the things that keep our social safety net together. And that's what I'm talking about doing. And guess what? I've been the facilities chair of the council, which no one thinks is a really exciting committee, but guess what? It's allowed me to see the ways in which we can leverage our money better. So I'm talking about doing three things: taking a real assessment and looking at ways we are wasting money. We have duplicative contracts. I can tell you where multiple entities are doing the same jobs. That's wasted dollars. We oftentimes don't go and enforce warranties. I know we have building $30 million schools the next year that are modernized, and the next year issues arise, and we're not exercising our warranty. Tons of money there to be utilized. We also don't leverage our federal dollars, and that's in every way. We leave money on the table in education, in affordable housing, in transportation environment. And so I'm talking about having every agency leverage all of the federal dollars we can get to address some of our issues. In addition to that, we also have the ability to look at ways in which we as a government are continuously allowing loopholes for different corporations who are not paying their fair share as a way to raise revenue. And we leave money on the table. I have been overseeing DOB, Department of Buildings. We assess millions of dollars in fines, but collect on a very tiny percentage of those collections. I'm talking 1 to 2% of collections on millions of dollars. We leave money on the table. And so this is a reality in our city that we can pay for these things because we have the ability to cut government waste, stop leaving federal dollars on the table. We don't have to raise the taxes on hardworking people. That's not what we're going to do.
So you don't want to raise taxes, no new fees or anything like that?
I don't want to raise taxes on working families in the district. And I think in this moment where everyone's feeling the crunch, we should not be raising taxes on the hard-working families in this city. But there are loopholes that we can close in looking at how we raise revenue in the city. And so we're going to explore those options. But that's after we take a real honest assessment.
All right, last question. Let's end on a good note here. Favorite restaurant in the city?
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so I get this question a lot. And so I have to like differentiate between the type of restaurant. So I love a sit-down restaurant in my ward, which is Andreen's. It's on 3rd and Kennedy, and she makes the best jerk chicken.
Oh, man.
You know, I love some, you know what I mean? I love Caribbean food, got cabbage, the mac and cheese is amazing. Andreen's, I order from Andreen's all the time. So it's my favorite restaurant in terms of like how I literally, you know, love. When my friends come in town, I like Bilos.
I haven't been there, no.
No, Bios is so good. It's like Greek-based restaurant, and the fish is amazing. Like they just have different types of fish with different flavorings. So,
you're hungry now?
yeah, absolutely. So check out Andreen's on 3rd and Kennedy. I'm telling you, it's a jerk chicken sandwich and jerk wings you have not had before. If you want to have friends in town, Bilos is a good choice. And they do like a fun thing on Thursdays where they wave, you know, the white napkins like you're in Greece. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, we've been there a lot.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Janeese Lewis George, run for a council member and candidate for DC mayor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
It.
Truly. Thanks.
The things we're watching in DC this week, it's Keep the Beat Week, celebrating 50 years of a distinctly DC sound. Go-Go, of course. The celebrations kicked off at the Howard Theater Monday. And we're learning more about the more than $800 million transformation of Capital One Arena. This week, the exterior construction is taking shape. It's expected to be done and ready for the 2027-2028 season. Also, it's time to talk money in DC. Mayor Bowser wants to hear from you. She's holding budget engagement forums. I know, doesn't sound fun, but it's important to share your ideas and let her administration know what should be prioritized. The next forum is this Saturday, February 21st at the Berry Farm Rec Center in Southeast. Also, a lot of you talking about that massive wastewater spill in the Potomac, 240 million gallons almost a month ago. Rafael Sanchez-Cruz, he's been covering it for nearly a month now. We know repairs and cleanup underway. We also got some breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news that Mayor Muriel Bowser is declaring a state of emergency zone. This is important because this sets up for the district to get money from the federal government to not only pay for any repairs, emergency repairs that the district might have to put up, but also any cost for DC water. So this is really important. We know emergency repairs probably will be done by mid-March. DC officials are still telling people, please don't touch the water, but it is safe to drink the water.
And they keep reiterating that point. It is safe to drink.
They keep reiterating the water because there was a different messaging coming out from the Director of Energy and the Environment, basically saying he would eat the fish in the Potomac. He had to take that back and then said, by the way, don't do that. Please do not touch the water if not necessary. Important to note, though, every jurisdiction, so DC, Maryland, and Virginia, has different messaging, so we'll see how that all plays out.
Okay, we got it. We know you'll stay on top of it. Thank you, Rafa. All right, so how about we end this on a high note, if you will, huh? I told you DC is celebrating 50 years of Go-Go this week, but that's not all. The city is marking the 1-year anniversary of the Go-Go Museum and Cafe in Anacostia, which is focused on preserving Go-Go's story, the culture, and keeping that beat alive. That's why my shout out for the week goes to the Go-Go Museum's Make Go-Go Forever initiative. These are students from the Panthers Funk Band, along with BJ Simmons, cranking out a piece for this show, the DC Beat. This is the next generation of Go-Go right here, and this initiative is making sure students have a platform to learn, teach, inspire, and shine. Some of the other youth bands include Next Gen Crank and Soul of Seed, made up primarily of DC public school students. They sound great, don't they? And on that beat, that does it for the DC Beat this week. Thank you for watching. I'll see you back here next Wednesday.